We're racing against time, hacking the mainframe, and trying not to die at the hands of our robot overlords. That either means we've been teleported roughly 1 week into our dystopian future, or we're playing Impossible Mission on this episode of Doki Doki Game Club. Hello and welcome to Doki Doki Game Club, a retro video game podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fincher, and I am joined today by 3 visitors. Frank Martin.
Hello.
Brian Grogan.
Yep.
And Mr. Joseph Lester.
Yo.
On Doki Doki Game Club, we each take a turn choosing a particular title from video game history, and we announce the selection online so everyone can play along at home. From there, we have 2 weeks to spend with the title, at which point we reconvene to dig into the ins and outs of the selection. Today's pick was made by Brian, and that title is Impossible Mission for the Commodore 64.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Impossible Mission, originally released in 1984 on the Commodore 64 by Epyx, that's EPYX, was also ported to Apple II, Atari 7800, ZX Spectrum, Acorn Electron, BBC Micro, Amstrad CPC, and Sega Master System. A direct sequel, Impossible Mission 2, was released 4 years later, while a remake of the original was released by developer System 3 for Sony PSP, Nintendo DS, and Nintendo Wii in the late 2000s. Epyx was also developer of such titles as Jumpman, California Games, and the non-Unix release of Rogue, which is the originator and namesake of the roguelike genre. And Epyx developed a handheld console, the Handy, which it later licensed to Atari to become the Atari Lynx. Impossible Mission stands at number 18 at the top Commodore 64 games of all time by Lemon64.com, and was given a 95% by Zap64 Computer Game Magazine at the time of the release, and the Wikipedia entry titled 1984 and Video Gaming listed as one of the 17 notable releases that year between computer and console games. And before anyone's thinking otherwise, it's important to point out that Impossible Mission and Mission Impossible, the popular television and movie spy series, has nothing to do with each other. So, Mr. Grogan, you've picked a game from way back, and I'd like to learn a little bit about your history with this game, because I'm pretty sure that no one else on the show here had any pre-existing familiarity with this title. So lay it on us. Like, where did this come into your gaming history?
Well, my gaming history starts really early. My grandfather worked with the computers, and he got my brother and myself first a VIC-20 and then a Commodore 64. So that was my early gaming education. Started pretty way back to the tape deck games. I think Space Invaders might have been the first one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You win.
But yes, as a kid, I found Impossible Mission truly that impossible. As a teenager, I found Mission Impossible 2 for the Nest and the used games bin, and that again was impossible for me at that age. But it wasn't until emulation became a thing, circa 2000, that I gave it a shot for real. And I haven't really touched the game for another better part of 2 decades. Until now.
Well, that kind of brings up an interesting topic, and something that I feel like we've maybe neglected a little bit, and that's kind of like a general picture of everyone's earliest gaming history. We kind of, obviously, we hit on certain titles that we grew up loving, especially when you start drawing parallels between different types of games. But hearing Brian talk about something that is so far back, I guess, like, what is the earliest memory you guys have of video games? Like, maybe let's start with Joseph, because I know that's a little further back than Frank, and we can kind of go from there. So, Joseph, was Nintendo your very first video game system?
It was definitely my first console. Like, my first experience with games probably goes back to, playing stuff like Pac-Man and Galaga in the arcades, and like Dig Dug, all those early Namco games and whatnot. But yeah, I think it was probably around my 5th birthday that I received a Nintendo as a present. And I remember walking out, and that was my first home console experience. So I never got to play. Like, I had friends that had Ataris, and I played them, after the NES. So yeah, I was just an NES boy through and through.
How about you, Frank? What was because you're a little younger than the rest of us? What was the origins of your gaming history?
I had cousins that had an NES, because I was born in '86, and I think the NES came out in North America in '86 or in '85.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was already released, but I remember getting a hand-me-down 2600. It was my first console,
Nice.
An Atari. Yeah, and I used to play it on this like old-fashioned like antenna black and white TV with the big clickers on it.
Oh yeah,
Wood panel?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely wood panel. And this was like probably in like 88, 89 or so. And I remember playing Pitfall. I think that might have been the only game that I had. And maybe Burger Time. Was that a game?
Not for Atari. I don't.
No.
Well, I mean, there might have been a janky port of it. I'm pretty sure there was a port.
Yeah,
but
Brian,
pretty
I'm
sure
going
there was
to
a
refer
port,
to
yeah.
Brian on that one. Okay, yeah.
Either way, it was
I
like
wouldn't
one of
swear by
those
it, yeah.
kind of Burger Time looking game. It might have been another like a knockoff.
of which
game.
there were many.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and then afterwards, my parents got me an NES probably in like '89 or so.
Nice. Yeah, strangely enough, my earliest memory of gaming was absolutely the Atari. And it's strange because at this point, like, I can't even recall if it was the 2600 or the 5600. Is that the next step up?
I have no idea.
Oh boy, see, I feel I feel bad even referring to it then. We definitely had. I think the reason that I'm confused about which iteration of the Atari it was that I know for a fact we had a couple of those weird controllers that weren't just the joystick and button, that like had the little dial and the several face buttons on it.
Okay.
And so I'm almost certain that wasn't a 2600 invention. I think it came later. It might have even been the third one, which I think was 7800.
7800.
Yeah, might have been that one, but definitely remember playing Atari a lot. And I remember us having like a baseball game, Pitfall, of course, and Pole Position. I mean, we had a lot of stuff. Missile Command. I mean, we had a ton of Atari games for some reason, and I've never sat down to have a conversation with my mother about like how that became a thing. Like, did they just get a bunch of this stuff? Like, were they gamers at one point? I mean, they had me pretty early on in their lives. I mean, my dad was 19 when I was born, and my mom was 21, and so. Yeah, so by the time I was, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, like, and aware of video games, we definitely, it's kind of like a thing that was just sort of always in my house, and without, spending too much time talking about gaming history, like to move on from the Atari into the NES, I still have vivid memories of being, I was born in 1980, so I'm 37 now. So in 1986, I was 6, and my aunt and her new husband at the time, Brian, he'd got a Nintendo as soon as it came out, and
Nice.
he was like a PC guy already. Like he had a computer, and like I didn't do much with it, but I remember like seeing I knew that he was into PC games, and but he got an NES as soon as it came out, and I remember like playing it at their house, and they lived several hours away. Like, I live in Florida, and it's a massive long state, and it takes forever to get from one side to the other, and they lived in Jacksonville, and I lived closer to the south side of Florida, and so we would occasionally visit, and I would play this thing and just lose my mind. I mean, it's so much better, than the NES was so much better to me than the Atari was. So and so 87 rolled around, and I got one, and that was kind of the rest of its history from there. So.
And now you host this podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how everything. Yeah. So now you know. Everyone listening knows that's how we got to this point. So, all right. Now it's time for
Back of the Box.
Impossible. It's been a long time since the agency stamped a mission that way. Back then, agents had numbers like 006 and 007, but the agency had never faced a foe quite like the fiendishly clever ELVIN until now. Your mission, Agent 4125, we've lost an agent or two since 007, is to foil ELVIN's horrible plot. From his underground laboratory, the nefarious scientist is holding the world's population hostage under the threat of nuclear annihilation. You must penetrate the rooms and tunnels of his stronghold, avoid his human-seeking robots, and search for the pieces of his security code. Somersault over the robots or use a precious snooze code to deactivate them long enough to search each room. As you find code pieces, the agency's computer will help you unscramble the passwords, or you can try to solve them yourself. You've got to reach ELVIN's control center, but you better watch your step. They didn't stamp this mission impossible for nothing.
Okay, so we have learned the the rather elaborate and intricate setup for Impossible Mission, courtesy of Mr. Brian Grogan. And Brian, now I'm going to turn it over to you because I want to know, in a nutshell, what Impossible Mission is.
Okay, have you ever played Spelunky? Or how about Rogue Legacy? Or maybe The Binding of Isaac? Well, this game might actually be the first ever action roguelike, with randomly placed and arranged rooms. Try not to get zapped by robots in this platformer adventure and collect items in the hopes of cracking the code of a mad scientist's subterranean lair in order to prevent nuclear doomsday.
Interesting. Wow. So, that actually does a great job of opening up the first sort of talking point that I'd like to hit on here. And that is to kind of give the listeners at home a little bit of clarification on what it is to make a game a roguelike game. Because, you mentioned Rogue Legacy, and I certainly have familiarity with that, but I can't say that I played the other two. And despite knowing what that term means, generally speaking, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit.
Well, the general idea is for the stages of a game to be generally or generated procedurally, or i.e. random. So if you have like a dungeon crawler was the original Rogue. Each level would be randomly generated. You have rooms that would be all placed in kind of random formation, and then corridors that would connect those. I think over the last maybe decade or so, the idea of using that random generation has kind of taken off between, like I said, Spelunky, Binding of Isaac, FTL, Risk of Rain, Enter the Gungeon, Dead Cells, and others. They've really kind of taken off.
Yeah.
Now, I with the roguelikes, so if we take this sort of starting point of Impossible Mission as a roguelike, and the thing that defines it as fitting into that genre along with the rest of of the modern day equivalents of this sort of game is that randomization of the stage layout. So like your rooms and your corridors to the rooms are scattered in different ways every time you play the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I really appreciated that as a kid. Like I just would play the game and then fail basically. But yeah, every time you start up, you have these columns of elevators that towers, if you will, that link to different rooms. The rooms themselves, I think, the layout of the room is static, and where the robots are placed is static. But I think. And where the items are that you have to search for in the room, those are random, and then the robot behavior is random as well.
That spices things up pretty well, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And especially if you think back to the sorts of games of that era and the sort of limited technological capabilities, to be able to do something like that, takes the variability and the replayability, I think, to a place that a lot of other games just,
Well, yeah, I think it takes, this would otherwise be a pretty rote game that you could just do once and memorize and play. If you wanted to play it again, you would just kind of follow your notes and do it. But I think I I've only played a few roguelikes, like ones that you mentioned, like Spelunky and Binding of Isaac, and I have mixed feelings about them. But I do appreciate the fact that they, like you said, they encourage replaying the game and like experiencing it differently every time, and knowing that you're going to get that fresh start every time you you enter the world again. And correct me if I'm wrong, but would you also say that a feature of roguelikes is like the kind of just restarting, like fresh starts and having to do things over again?
I guess,
yeah, definitely. Like people always say, permadeath is a big thing. Of course, you can die, a bunch in this, but you can also definitely just lose outright. If you run out,
that's happened to me a few times.
Yeah, you're right. So to explain, you get 6 real-time hours to finish the game, but every time you die, you lose 10 minutes. So that's like 36 deaths, I think.
That's why my sessions were only about 40 minutes long.
Right.
Yeah, mine varied wildly, and I don't think it was until you explained that today that I was like, or yesterday, whenever it was, that that it dawned on me that it was shaving time off with each death. I was just kind of like, man, sometimes my experience with this game is just super short, and other times, like, I'm wandering around and attempting to do some of the other things that we'll get into, but. That's it's funny too. If you listen to the last episode with Jack Bros, this is a game that has taken that timer thing and sort of made I guess maybe it's not an entirely fair comparison, but the timer as health. Like if you continue to die.
Sure.
In this game, I find that pretty interesting. I don't know. Like in Jack Bros, it was just frustrating, but in this one, I was like, I was a little more into that idea. I think maybe because it's a bigger.
You got a more bigger budget with your time than you do with Jack Bros.
It's also more thematically interesting, I think, in the context of Impossible Mission. Whereas the timer was not anything in the context of Jack Bros.
Sure.
Well, that's not entirely true, right? Because I don't want to sit here and talk about Jack Bros, but I think
neither do I.
Yeah, so let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
No, but one thing I think I'd like to point out, at least, I guess as it pertains to Rogue Legacy, is a huge part of that game, and you can tell me if this is kind of indicative of other games in this subgenre, is that you are continuing to progress even though you're dying repeatedly, and I guess. The similarity with Impossible Mission, at least from what I could gather, was as you're exploring the items in the game in order to find the passcodes that you need, or the puzzle pieces that in turn become the password. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's maybe talk about what is the experience of playing this game. Brian, do you want to go into that?
Well, I'm just getting zapped constantly until you get the kind of the idea of like, oh, this room you gotta flip through here and go through there, and like this room, if the robots are placed in this way, there's no way getting past it. You got to use a snooze password. And,
so talk a bit about that. What do you mean when you say snooze password?
Okay, so every room has at least one terminal, sometimes a couple, that aren't really like searchable items where you're trying to search for things. You actually go to it, and if you have found either a lift reset or password reset or snooze, we called it snooze control when I was a kid. It'll actually disable the robots. There's no collision with them. They stay still, and you can run right through them, and that allows you to get through some boards. I think as a kid, I didn't really understand that. I understood like, oh, I got to use this to get past this. I don't think I understood as a kid that no, it's like some of these levels are impossible unless you have that, and so it's you're going to want to come back later if you don't have what you need.
Well, when I first started playing, I was kind of playing it as a Metroidvania where I thought I had to grab stuff later on that would apply to where I was at the start. Sure. So I thought there was like I didn't know it was like a generic passcode. I thought there was one passcode for one room, and you'd have to get it later on and then come back to that room kind of way. And I was playing it really wrong actually, because I was all over the place, and then like I think I wasn't playing it linearly, because I think the best thing to do is just do one tower, then do another tower, then you know what I mean? Like keep pushing forward that way.
Right.
So before we sort of venture off into different territory, I kind of want to clarify a little bit for listeners that haven't played this game, exactly what the process is. So, you're playing this character, you're this agent, you're stepping into a room, and you are physically exploring pieces of furniture. So you have like easy chairs and toilets and printers.
Sounds so exciting when you put it that way.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. So there's lots of it's furniture, right? I mean, for the most part, there's other computer terminals and pieces of gadgetry and like
vending machines, maybe.
Yeah, like some machinery. But
some stuff doesn't make sense. Like you have it's like who put that typewriter up there?
Yeah, right.
It's all the way up in
don't
the
forget
corner.
the dust, the garbage bins, because every sink and toilet will have a garbage bin next to it that is actually searchable.
This laboratory is buck wild, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, it really is, and I think it's me projecting my sense of whimsy onto this, but the idea to me that this ELVIN ATOMBENDER nut job is just like making this lab, filling it full of Daleks or something from Doctor Who, and then just putting pieces of furniture everywhere in case he decides that he wants to have a seat or a nap or use the bathroom. It's just so weird and just.
But I do like that there's consistency in the room, so you won't have a room with a bed and a bathroom. Like it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't pay that close attention to it.
Yeah, boy, I didn't either. Kudos to you.
Yeah, because I started noticing patterns that was like, okay, so this is a bedroom because there's a bed and then there's like a side table and there's a lamp. I was like, okay, that made sense. But then there's like a room that's kind of blue, and then there's a toilet and a sink and a bathtub. I was like, okay.
Did you make it to the room that had? I think it had 12 jukeboxes.
No, I did make it to a room that
one.
had like those old school computers with it looks like reel to reel in there, like two like.
Yeah. I definitely remember.
These graphics are all up to interpretation, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can reliably say what one thing is and one thing isn't.
It's more advanced than like an Atari.
I believe one clearly said candy on it. So
yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, like a vending machine in case ATOMBENDER gets hungry. It's just funny that there's like there are no other human characters to interact with. I mean, obviously it's easier just to make a bunch of robots and color swap them out and give them different behaviors, but which is what this game does. But so I got a little off topic there, but as you explore these items in this game, you have a progress bar, which is like a main feature of how you interact in this world. And so it's timed, and you're exploring, and it's supposed to symbolize, I guess the time it would take to look through a bookcase or check the cushions of a couch. And as the bar, once the bar is complete, you're either told that there was nothing there, or you're given a piece of a puzzle.
Or a password.
The password.
Or a password, yeah. And so the password, you get two options every time you find a front-facing computer terminal. And I guess that would be the right term for facing you, the player. Yeah. And you interact with those, and you can turn a robot off temporarily for some sort of I couldn't quite determine how long
20
it was.
seconds or so.
It's a pretty brief. You can turn every robot in a room off. Or you can reset platforms, little elevator platforms, back to their original position, which is important because at certain rooms you'll come across, there's a bit of a puzzle element to it. Yeah.
And otherwise, they only reset when you die, and that means you lost 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
Is that the duration? 10 minutes?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I wonder in the lore of the game, does he pass out and then a robot drags him at the start of that place, and then he wakes up 10 minutes later?
No, I played the game. He definitely dies. He just
over and over again.
No, him getting electrocuted like that. I think that kind of messed me up as a kid. Like thinking
no
about
way.
the idea of like I don't know, being like
atomized.
Yeah, pretty much like electrocuted into like nothing.
The dust.
Just kind of
horrifying.
Kind of freaked me out.
And the sound effects that come along with it are horrifying.
Yeah, I don't know if we can talk about the audio right now, or did you want to keep it for later on?
No, I think that's a good opportunity actually, because it's something special.
Because this game, unlike most Commodore games, doesn't have a soundtrack. Like the SID chip is not really used in any kind of way, so it's just tick tock, you walking around and the grr of the lasers.
It's piercing. So it's like a electronic arc that comes out of these little Daleks, And man, it is. I had it hooked up to a nice big set of speakers and a subwoofer and everything. And I had the volume loud, man, and it was like boring into my brain.
Oh my god!
We have a very skittish cat, and she was laying on the bed, and boy, the first time that those robots started in on that, she wasn't
ran away
having
for
it.
good.
She wasn't having it.
But that's the thing. It was like there's like speech synthesis. I don't know if it's not samples. I think it's like manipulating the chip in some way. Because as far as I know, the SID doesn't have any like wave playback or anything.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked. But interesting. So that was done. The Epics outsourced that to Electronic Speech Systems Technology, who actually also did the voice work for Sesame Street, Big Bird's Hide and Speak for NES.
Which is, if I'm not mistaken, the NES title with the most vocal audio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Retro Game Audio, the fellow podcast, they noted that it doesn't have the longest sample ever. I think Dirty Harry has that, but
right.
But yeah,
they have a good episode that talks about that.
Yeah, I was going to say if you have any interest in like as a kid, you get that whole Blades of Steel, for the NES is like the one that sticks out in my mind. But yeah, if vocal samples or synthesized voices in a video game interest you, you should definitely check that episode out because it is.
Mine is
they go
Bad
into
Dudes.
great detail.
Yeah,
Bad Dudes.
Skate or Die is pretty good too.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But going back to these voices, I'm 90% sure they're like it's not samples. It's just like fabricated with the chip, but it sounds really good and horrifying. Like when you fall into a pit, that is like it goes like ah.
It all sounds like what I imagine death. It's just like personification of death.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. Like the first time I got it, I laughed and also kind of got a little scared at the same time. It was very like abrasive.
While we're on the topic of sound design, like I just kind of want to point out that the lack of music, it makes... I realize that you can kind of go one way or the other with it, but something about that lack of music and those painfully, abrasive sound effects and voice samples, like really added to the oppressive atmosphere of the game to me.
Sure.
And I don't know if have you guys seen the television show? It was late 60s, so I've obviously seen reruns of it's called The Prisoner.
Oh, I was going to bring that up.
Oh, cool. Well, it's a good opportunity to do so. So aesthetically, it kind of has that vibe, even though there's you're in a kind of a high-tech underground facility, so it's different in that regard. But the one thing that when I first played the game that really stood out in my mind about being prisoner-esque is the inclusion of that giant floating black orb.
Yep. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, it's black instead of white, but and
the idea is the same, and it kind of floats around in a menacing way, and like
and it actually trails you in the game. As opposed to just like being on a set path like the robots are.
Yeah, you do find one. I was gonna say you do find one orb that has a pattern.
Yeah, it does like a figure eight. Yep. I don't want to dwell too long on The Prisoner, but I'm just curious, Frank or Joseph, have you guys seen that show before?
I have not, but I'm aware of it, but that's it.
Yeah, same. I've never watched it, but I know
it ages pretty well. I mean, it's probably been 5 or 10 years since I last tried to watch it, but it's cool. I mean, a guy like trapped in a creepy fabricated, like a prefab village where all of the citizens are issued a number. And
I know the Iron Maiden song.
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely reference to that.
It was bold sci-fi for the age.
Yeah,
definitely
worth watch.
About the black pursuer ball, did you guys ever pop it?
Well,
I don't know how it would just happen.
If it collides with a robot, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I just thought that was a glitch, but that's interesting to know that is a consistent mechanic because I didn't have it happen often enough to.
Well, I could see why you would think it was a glitch because it just disappears.
Right.
Yeah. There's no sound effect. There's no anything. It just
there's nothing to it. Yeah. Otherwise,
just goes
there's
away.
If I could go back to the sound, just for 1 second.
Yeah.
So your character does the somersault. I'll maybe talk about that in a second. But the shoes that the character is apparently wearing just make my ankles hurt. like he's wearing these really hard sole shoes, and you could hear it on like whatever the ground is, and like
clank, clank, clank.
exactly this is like the most uncomfortable thing to be doing flips in. But
yeah. But speaking of flips, that's one thing that I if you're not gonna play this game or even look it up, like if you have any like knowledge of Prince of Persia, the animation on the main character reminds me a lot of Prince of Persia.
Oh, sure.
Like it's very
funny.
fluid.
This is my second game to have kind of that.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
I don't know how that happened. But
Character animation is important to Brian. So.
Yeah, like it feels like it's more than 3 frames. And same with the robots. They have like a facing left, and then maybe like a quarter, and then a half, and then a quarter, and then back to the right.
Did
it's
you
a
ever
very
see you ever see the robots that look behind them when they're looking for you? So there's some that as they march, they'll look behind themselves every once in a while. I'd never
noticed.
It has it's very
cool.
has a very like personality thing to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really liked the idea of this game. I didn't like playing it, but I liked the idea of it. Like, I could see myself liking this game when I had an Atari 2600, but then I played NES, and then I said,
so. We talk about, you mentioned being frustrated by it, which makes me want to bring up the topic, the thing that I found maybe the most frustrating, which is the unnecessarily convoluted puzzle game mechanic.
oh my God.
Brian, since this is your game, please justify this creative choice.
Oh no! I won't justify it all. It's the unfortunate part of the game, really. So you get these puzzle pieces, 36 in all, and they come together as four pieces form together into a solid brick, basically,
Like a key card, kind of, I guess.
Yeah, which turns into a letter, which is one of 9 letters and a password.
Which sounds fine, but
yeah, it's just it's diabolical. Like you have to, so you have, the pieces can be either flipped. You can flip it vertically or horizontally, so you don't know what the proper orientation of the piece is.
And then you can change color.
It can change color, but you can just always turn it, one color. So it's weird. You can just turn anything any color you want. That's kind of
okay. I
I'm
thought you needed
my head at that one.
I thought you needed a blue, a yellow, and a green.
No. You can just you just change it to be whatever whatever color. So, and then
I obviously failed. I obviously failed miserably at the password thing.
I wish I could have told you guys this earlier, but I didn't even figure it out until my last playthrough, the last one that I streamed. If you use the dial pad in the bottom left hand corner, you can call up and it'll show you the correct orientation of the 2 puzzle pieces that are currently showing in the selector. Like you select through of them, so you can. It'll cost you 2 minutes of your time to make that call.
I didn't realize that. I knew you could do it, but I didn't realize there was a penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair, I guess.
Right.
But it would have taken you more than 2 minutes to figure it out in the first place.
Yeah,
It's kind of for a while.
No. It gets better if you... Okay, actually, the diabolical thing about it, like if that wasn't bad enough, a lot of the pieces fit together, and they're not meant to fit together, and so you can't finish. You can't finish a block if you do that.
Well, can you describe what's on these puzzle pieces for me and for the listeners, because it's like
I can. It's like a Rorschach test. Like it's just like
to me, it looks like screenshots like of a side scrolling like horizontal scrolling shmup.
Okay,
I totally thought. Yeah, it's like it looks
funny.
like a
Gradius or something.
ruined, like building ruins. There's like little windows, or like super hard angles.
But like some of them don't make any sense. They kind of look like
none of them make sense.
Well, sure, but like I know like some of them kind of look like a Van Halen guitar. There's like all these like
the lines and
the lines and stuff, and then some of them are like. I remember one. It was kind of like it looked like a puzzle piece. It was kind of roundish, and it kind of looked like art from Animal Style. I don't know if you can.
Oh, sure.
You
know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, glitch art.
That's a deep cut.
I hope Joey's listening to this.
Yeah, deep cut. But it reminded me of Animal Style kind of art, and then I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But yeah, it's very convoluted, and I never was able to make a piece.
I mean, even talking about it for 2 or 3 minutes now, like I feel like we're just not like selling this thing properly. It is so complicated. Like some of these puzzle pieces have the tiniest, thinnest little lines, and then
And how do you know which one it goes to? Like there's no explanation, rhyme or reason. Like it's.
And do you think that the developers of this game thought, okay, so we've got an action platformer, we've got a game that involves, somewhat expert timing, but when the player's done with that, like, what do we leave them with? Because you really you play this game in like halves. One half is you running around grabbing pieces, jumping and doing all the fun stuff in the game, and then the other half is you just sitting in a hallway, like fumbling with like cycling through a menu.
You know what was unfortunate about that is that both times that I streamed, most of the people that joined the watch were joining during the puzzle part.
Oh no!
They're like, "What is this?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, guys. Like it was a lot more exciting like 20 minutes ago." But
you should have seen me flipping. I swear I was doing it.
So Brandon, actually, I think you're actually right about like them wanting to have I mean, it sounds cheesy to have a higher purpose to that. So, Epix also developed a game for Dragon Riders of Pern, if you're familiar with that book series.
Oh, sure.
And it was like a political strategy game, but it also had a.
Please never ever pick that game.
Next time.
I've never been able to get anywhere on that, but it has an action element, and actually on the box of Dragon Rise of Pern, that game, it says action games for strategy players or strategy gamers or something like that. So they're I think they're kind of branding themselves as hybrid, like yes, it's action, but it's also cerebral.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I think that's what their thrust was. I don't think it worked out in this
no
point, but
it was overly complicated. I mean, there had to have been a better way to make that puzzle process more fun. I just can't think about what it might be off the top of my head, though.
Right.
Well, I think the way you play this game says a lot about you in general, because when I was playing Impossible Mission, my sense of progress was completely tied to how much of the map was showing up on the bottom of the screen. Because as you go from room to room, you have kind of, it's almost like a Super Metroid style map at the bottom.
And that's what kind of made me think it was a Metroidvania.
That's what I was thinking. Might have tripped you up at the beginning.
We as action gamers have been trained to to see that and identify that in a specific way.
I was like, sweet progress. But what would happen is I would have a full session of playing, and it wouldn't be until the timer was almost up that I would learn one thing about the game. And and then I would carry that knowledge, and this is one thing I can appreciate about it, is I would carry that knowledge into my second playthrough, which is kind of what
holy
you do.
roguelike.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And it's kind of like retaining experience without earning experience in the game.
Yeah.
I retained my own experience, and then sure enough, I would go through another 6-hour session, which would actually be roughly 33 minutes. And
if that.
And then at the end, I would learn one more thing. Like at the end of my third playthrough, I was like, "Oh, now I know how to use the menus." And I would start like, there's like a phone button you can like call up people and like ask two questions.
Yeah, like
you can hop on the dial up.
Yeah, you can hop on the dial up, and it does. Yeah, it makes the old modem sound.
Yeah, for the first like 3 or 4 playthroughs, because I did a bunch because I kept dying, but I was like, never mind this menu. I need to figure out what I'm doing first, because like it doesn't tell you anything, right? You're just dropped into this world, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm jumping. I'm doing flips to a computer, and then try to figure out, I need a password. Okay, how do I get a password? And then so on and so forth. So yeah, you kind of learn, like you said, you learn one bit at a time, and I can definitely appreciate that as well. Like it's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm with you on that sort of like figure it out as you go approach to this. Because Brian had some helpful some guides to kind of help us along, but I was like, I'll read that later. And
oh, really?
Should have read it right away.
But I should have. But this game is definitely a game where it revealed to me my own stubbornness because there are some rooms in the game. I can think of one specific room type that kept showing up that had small platforms and pits in equal proportion to one another.
Oh, yeah.
That littered across the floor from left to right.
And
And
you
there's
can't
a computer
jump.
terminal in the middle, and an elevator platform on the one to the left. And so anyhow, it's hard to describe in a podcast, but you've got these little platforms, and it's not hard to clear the room to get from one side to the next, but the things that you wish to interact with, I just, no matter what I did, I could not like line it up just right to get on the elevator. And so I would just die over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I just kept butting my head against the wall.
There are gaps. Those gaps that were there, you can actually run over them rather than
No,
jumping.
you can't. Are you telling me that?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you totally can.
What, like how Mario does? Like how he can run
Yeah.
over those single gaps? Oh.
Yeah. Well, because the collision with the ground was actually with the feet, and if your foot, reaches the next platform, you can do that.
Jesus. Yeah.
Because I feel bad. I
That's
should
good
have
to
given
know.
a lot more, tips than I did.
How would you know that? I
figured
wouldn't do that. I mean, I would come into a room and I would just stand there and like assess the room and go. I would look at robot movement patterns. I would be very analytical about it, because you kind of need to take a sort of puzzle strategy approach to, especially if a room is full of searchable furniture. I just didn't attempt to run past it. I was just jumping everywhere.
And I think there's a couple things that are kind of jarring for modern gamers. The fact that, you had pixel perfect collision with the robots. Like even if you jumped and your hand was out, like if it just barely touched the robot, you're toast. But like there was a couple of the fact that you had to jump and you did this like forcible somersault. It was almost like Castlevania in a way. Like there was no control while you're in the air.
No.
It's full commitment.
Yeah, and I think like modern gamers are still, even in like 3D games, we're used to having like, well, here's the center of my character, and as long as the center of my character is still above ground, I'm okay. You're not thinking of like in real life you have a foot here and you have a foot there.
But I had myself dying in a pit constantly because I would undershoot my jump. The tip of my toes would hit the ledge, and there would be like a
slide off.
like a slight delay,
Yeah.
and then just be like, whoop, and like I was like, oh man, I should have made that. Like, I should have cleared that, but obviously not. Like it was very not frustrating. It was just like I couldn't get the timing right in my head. Like it doesn't play like a normal platformer, I guess.
Yeah, no, I suppose
definitely.
not.
Yeah.
Well, are there any other particular aspects to the game that you guys want to dive a little deeper into, or should we kind of rally and come back with some final thoughts?
Well, I wanted to actually just bring up one more thing. That claim that I said about it being the first action roguelike is actually a really big one. If you look at the Wikipedia page for roguelike and you look for what's listed there as hybrid roguelikes, the first one is listed as Toe Jam and Earl.
Okay.
Wow.
And because it apparently
I never
had
would have put that in the list.
Yeah, apparently there's like randomly generated like boards. I'm not really familiar with the game.
No, me neither. But yeah,
yeah. Apparently some randomly generated kind of like
I think some of its stages are randomly generated. I don't know to what extent, but yeah.
So it lists it at that. So I'm going like I don't know, almost a decade before that.
Yeah,
and, I'm making kind of a bold claim. I didn't want to make that claim until I actually went to the roguelike subreddit and asked around there, and people, they really didn't challenge it. It was actually like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then I got into a conversation with Mark Johnson, the creator of a roguelike, Ultima Ratio Regium. He's also the frequent co-host of Roguelike Radio podcast. I had just noticed who he was, and I was like, I listen to your podcast all the time. But he brought up something that I was actually thinking is this. It's like some games like FTL are actually unwinnable. Like sometimes they can, because it's random, sometimes they can throw at you.
There's unwinnable circumstances.
Circumstances, based on your build. Maybe if you chose a different build at the start of this game, you would have done, you would have survived, but not with the stealth ship or, whatever. He was, him and I, we went back and forth and we postulated it's perhaps possible but improbable that this game would throw enough rooms where you need snooze and not give you enough snoozes.
Oh yeah.
I haven't really gone that out to to its full study, but it's possible. But yeah, probably not really probable.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, by numbers, it could probably happen. But yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's interesting to hear that FTL has that potential for that problem, and that's
only in hard mode, not on easy mode.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, so the game just sort of generates what you need, or pulls a punch, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like it's just like the fights are not as harsh on easy mode, but there's some roguelikes that are like that, some non-action roguelikes that are like, well, there's only a certain amount of games that are winnable, and you just have to be there to win the ones that are winnable.
Yeah, because the ones that I've played, like, they're certainly winnable, but it also has, games like Binding of Isaac have just situations in which you won't get dealt and like ideal item drops.
Yeah,
that's probably the extent of their not being unwinnable, but the extent of their fairness to you from game to game.
That concept, though, of a game that deals in random, in randomness, being, just broken, just flat out broken, and in a certain combination of pieces being put together, and I guess
right. I mean, the idea is if you made it anything less than that, it would be too easy for the kind of people that would play it.
Right, so, like if there's going to be some sort of fail-safe, there's definitely and I say this with nothing but love for you, Brian, but there is definitely a certain type of masochist that flocks to the roguelike games, and I mean, and I don't say that like you can't enjoy the game otherwise, because like, I mean, Rogue Legacy, if you're listening to this game and you don't really have a lot of experience with roguelike games, I would definitely say that's the friendliest.
Yeah, Spelunky like is pretty good for that too.
I don't think Spelunky is very friendly. It's fun, but it's not friendly.
When I say
Very
friendly, I
friendly.
definitely mean like training wheels.
I guess.
I mean, I've played all the way through Rogue Legacy, and there's a lot of hacking and slashing going on, and it doesn't take too long to get from point A to point B.
Well, that game, between deaths, you actually gain character levels, basically.
Yeah.
So you can build yourself up.
Yeah, but. Yeah, so if you want to dabble, if you want to dip your toes in the water, so to speak, I would say that Rogue Legacy is the friendliest of the bunch to dig into that. But I think as these games get a little more complicated, and you're still depending on that random generation, I could see how that could be a potential for a problem. Whereas you've got something that's a little more limited, like Impossible Mission, and it just seems harder to throw combinations of things at you that just won't pan out.
But the kids do love the random stuff. There are randomized races of Zelda 2, Zelda Link to the Past. You
did a run of something like that recently.
Yeah, I did
you?
a Zelda 2 randomized run. That being my jam. But yeah, it's there's I think Dark Souls randomizer and stuff like that. So that's,
I've seen that.
That's people love the replayability, and that's what.
And we need a Burger Time randomizer.
Yes.
Okay, so Impossible Mission. Was it impossible? Did you succeed? Well, I got to tell you that I, in no way, shape, or form, managed to succeed on any of my multiple sessions of this game. But I still had some fun, and I'm actually interested in knowing the sort of final impression that this game left you guys with. So let's start with Frank this time.
Well, in Joseph's standards, I did finish the game. I got the whole map done. So
You did it.
I did it, and then I just closed the game, and that's it. That was done. No, but I didn't finish it. I played like 6, 7, 8 times over a few days, and I gave it everything I got. I didn't enjoy it, but I tried my best, but I didn't finish it, no.
Well, so how about maybe let's do, as we're we're wont to do. Maybe your favorite thing and your least favorite thing about the game.
Sure. Favorite thing, definitely speech synthesis. I think that's what like impressed me the most. I was very like, oh, cool. And the least would definitely be the puzzles. And I know probably most of you guys are going to say the same thing, but it's just how convoluted and like no explanation. And I understand like video games are not weren't the same as today. Like they don't explain stuff, and that's fine. But it was just a little bit too convoluted for me. Like I was always second guessing myself, trying to figure out what I was doing. So I would give it a 1.5. Nothing is here out of 10.
Out of 10?
Right. Sorry, out of 5. Out of 10 to whatever.
Joseph, how about you? Where did this game? What sort of flavor did this game leave in your mouth?
It left a curious flavor in my mouth. I think, I've always thought this, but this game kind of drove this home that I guess I'm not that fond of randomness in my games. I think I like order, and I think that really comes through in the fact that I really wanted to complete this map, as I was going through rather than solve it. I didn't want to solve any puzzles.
I'll tell you what. Play the Sega Master System version, and if you just start your game from like just resetting the system, it'll be the same random seed every time.
Oh yeah,
that's
but if you die, and then the next game will be random.
Well, then I'll just like keep resetting that one.
There you go.
But so I don't enjoy. I found myself able to enjoy a few roguelikes in my time, but this one I didn't really enjoy the exploration. I thought it was, it's jumping around was fun, but yeah, after a while, I just kind of, it all bleeds together for me. And that's what randomness does to me in general. Like, I don't appreciate it as much as kind of a deliberately designed world. Like, that's more intriguing to me than randomly constructed or randomly arranged rooms. But on the plus side, I find this game, what you just said, I find it interesting. Like, I think it's really significant. In the history of games, I do appreciate how they just throw you into it, and they give you this weird menu and the dial-up modem and all the noises and how creepy it can be sometimes. Because I've come to associate Commodore 64 games with this kind of almost like, I feel like they would become creepypasta at this point to like kids who hadn't played it before. Like if they just saw. Like what's that one game called the Forest or something? Like that's a really scary one.
Beyond the Forbidden Forest.
Yeah, Beyond the Forbidden Forest. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of it might just be because I didn't have one, but I associate them with these kind of weird, very sinister games, and this certainly didn't disappoint in that regard. So I would give this game a 2 roaming rambunctious robots out of 5.
Nice. I'm going to go next, and It's strange because I'm a little column A and a little column B with we'll say Frank and Joseph's column. I don't know that I necessarily had fun with it, but there was something about the atmosphere of the game, and I think it clicked in my brain in particular. I mean, it's a combination of the sort of scenario lore, the voice synthesis, that menacing black orb that floats around, like really is, it's unsettling, and then the sound design, like I mentioned earlier, it definitely adds a lot to that, or the sparseness, the devotion to voice synthesis, as Frank mentioned, is definitely a star of the game for me. But I think my favorite part is kind of just the action elements, like the platforming. I'm such a fan of platformers, period. And this game, it gives you things to jump over, the elevator, so you got the verticality of it. So just the sort of movement through the game, and that sort of pixel perfect aspect to the jumping was probably my favorite thing. Least favorite thing, it's no big surprise, those puzzles. I tried and tried, and I didn't want to like pull up a guide and try to figure out, it just felt like too much trouble to have to like use an outside source to attempt to make sense of the order in which these pieces should be manipulated to get the password. But so ultimately didn't love the game, but I could see its charms and its significance is undeniable. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5.
That's a good one.
All right, Brian. So many years later, I don't know, when was the last time you played this game beforehand?
2000 something, yeah.
Yeah.
Like early 2000.
Is the spark still there for you? Is the nostalgia there? Does this game hold up for you?
Yeah, and I really, there's a lot of things that I really like about the game. The randomness, the crispness of the gameplay. The puzzles are definitely a misfire. Another thing I wish I could have gotten was if you left a room and hadn't cleared all the furniture pieces out yet, if it like highlighted that room or did something different. Like I wish
that would be nice.
I was about to like put like Post-it notes up on my screen to like note where that was, but yeah, and yeah, the puzzles definitely, nothing good about that. So yeah, I'll give it 4 rooms filled with a dozen jute boxes out of 5.
All right, so there you have it. And if you're listening to this and we've piqued your interest, I've got good news for you this time. Typically, we're big ballers with these high-price video games we like to play. But this one can be had on the real cheap. So according to pricecharting.com, you can get a loose copy of this for $19.99. Complete in box for $29.99, and a brand new spanking new copy of this for $34.95.
Not bad.
Yeah, depending on what your collection consists of, all of those options, in my opinion, are very affordable.
Now you just got to shell out a couple $100 for a Commodore 64.
Is that the catch? Yeah, I wasn't sure what the price on that was.
I'm curious to see how expensive like the VIC-21 is and stuff like that, if they're rarer or not than the original version.
Well, maybe our listeners can just send us some.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, as always, if you are interested in bestowing gifts upon us, hit us up on the social media and we will get you an address. But without further ado, I'd say now it's time for the
D.O.K.I Power Line.
That's right, it's D.O.K.I Powerline, where we plug you into the source for the hottest gamer tips and tricks. The winner of this episode's Powerline Pro Tip comes from Agent 4126, because Agent 4125 died literally 1,000 deaths. Joseph, would you like to read his dial-up fax machine message that he sent over?
If you want some cheats, you'll need to find a cracked version of the game by Remember, which includes a trainer option that gives you unlimited time. Snooze and lift reset passwords. Shortens the searching time and switches off collisions with robots.
All right. Thank you, Agent 4126, and Godspeed on your adventures through the underground base of ELVIN ATOMBENDER. So, now is the time that we announce the next game, and with us having completed Cycle 2 of Doki Doki Game Club, the choice falls back to me. And my selection, we're going to go into the far, far future of the Sony PlayStation 1, and we're going to play a little game called Gunner's Heaven. And that concludes episode 9 of Doki Doki Game Club. Before we try to crack the code one last time, I want to thank my password peeping co-host for joining me today. Who are you guys, and where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm Brian Grogan, online and Twitter at KenOShinobi.
Frank Martin, you can find me on Twitter at Hios_IO and on Twitch at Hios_.
I'm Joseph Lester. You can find me on Twitter at Moldilux, MOLDILOX. My website is subhumanzoids.com, and check out the podcast Subhuman Cast, for the Zoids by the Zoids.
Amen to that. And if Twitter is your thing and you want to follow me, as always, I am Genocide over there, DJINNOCIDE. And you can follow the show on Twitter as well at Doki Doki GC. In addition to that, we're practically on every other social network online as well, so search for Doki Doki Game Club all across the World Wide Web, or head over to dokidokigameclub.com. And if you see something missing, an absence of some sort of outlet that you'd like us on, hit us up, and we'll be happy to add that to the roster. So, thanks once again to everyone who continues to tweet about us using hashtag DokiDokiGC, or shares a link to the show on Facebook. be the juice in our circuits. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So if you have a couple of bucks and you can spare and you would like to show us your support in that manner, you can head on over to patreon.com/Doki Doki Game Club, where we have some pretty neat rewards available to anybody interested in keeping our podcast afloat. So on behalf of Brian, Frank, Joseph, and myself, thanks for listening. And until next time, adios, Battletoads.